Hey YouTube, this is Brian's Garage. Today is not a repair video. It's kind of I might have solved a really common issue with these Jeep Wranglers. From what I understand is they have head gasket issues, loss of coolant issues, and nobody can seem to find out where the coolant is going, and they like to start on fire. So today, well, let's kind of rewind it. My wife bought this Jeep. It's a 2015 Wrangler, 3.6, you know, probably typical for these things. But when we moved into our new house, we got that other stall there, and I noticed this thing was throwing off tons of heat. And I thought, well, you know, maybe it's because it's in a smaller space, you feel it more, or maybe it's just because the engine compartment on these things, there's not a lot of room on these things here, so I guess we'd walk by it, feel the heat, and just kind of dismiss it. Well, summer rolls around, and just the other day my wife told me my air conditioning isn't working. So I decided to start looking into it, and the first thing I checked was the electric fan there. So, and I noticed when you know, most vehicles, when you turn the AC on, it automatically kicks the electric fans to draw the heat, you know, and electric fans weren't starting on this thing. So I started checking fuses, relays. I did find a bad fuse, but that was for the trailer harness, so that shouldn't have nothing to do with it. But I noticed the electric fan wasn't kicking on. So I started digging around a little more. You know, I called O'Reilly's and Napa. Napa wants $579 for a fan because it has the module in it. I'm not sure you can see, but the back of the fan there has the module on it, and O'Reilly's wanted $600. So I started messing around with the connector here, applying power. I see that it has a, you know, an extra wire in there, so started trying to get readings. So didn't get nothing there. Fan still works. So then I started tearing the dash apart, and I'm like, all right, maybe there's a bad connector or something. You know, the Jeep, actually, when you turn the AC on this thing, gives out a lot of weird noises behind the dash. So, all right, well, the fan's not kicking on. I'm like, maybe it's the coolant sensor, you know, which is located right there where you see that red connector. So, and I started toying with this thing a lot, and I'm like, why in the hell isn't the air conditioning kicking on? The compressor's kicking on, but the fan's not kicking on. So I started digging around, and I pulled out my scanner. Sorry about that. But no codes. So I started kind of digging around, checking connectors, you know, for corrosion, and, you know, kind of started looking around at harnesses, and kind of, well, you know, if it's the temp sensor, the gauge is still working, so why isn't the electric fan kicking on? So, but the whole reason I made this video is I know there's a lot of better mechanics out there, or guys that have the access, you know, to Jeep and stuff like that, but I actually think I figured out why these things are losing coolant that can't be explained, and starting on fire and going through head gaskets. And I'm going to show you this right now. So at the temperature sensor here, we have a reading of 94 degrees. I had the fan on it. So where did the coolant come from? So we're at 95 degrees or whatever right at the coolant sensor there. Now these also have an oil pressure sensor on them too. But we got a reading here, you know, a quarter up on the gauge, operating temperature, you know, depending on your thermostat, 195, 205, somewhere in there. But in most cases, I think your electric fans kick on at 200. So what I'm going to do is start this thing, let it run here for a little bit. I did not kick it all the way down. So then I'm going to go to my gauge here and my scanner. And I want you guys to see, I wonder if I can, give me a second here to set up. Go to view all items. Okay, we're at 154. Okay, 156. So what I noticed here is I'll raise the temperature. The electric fans aren't kicking on. The temp gauge is starting to climb. And I did reduce the temperature so that way I could show, you know, the increasing of temperature. So I'm just kind of bringing that temperature up a little faster. And usually I guess with air conditioning, when somebody tells me their air conditioning isn't working, first thing I kind of check is the electric fans, you know. And then, you know, then you start going deeper into your Freon and, you know, stuff like that, checking for leaks, making sure your compressor's kicking on. So it didn't take long and she climbed up there to almost 200 degrees, right? Well, the temperature gauge, where it's at now is about where it's going to stop. It gets to about that half point and it stops. But this temperature gauge here will keep going. Okay, so now, you know, nothing serious, but I'll turn on the air conditioner. And let's get a temp reading on the air conditioner. So, not very cold. Let's see if the electric fan is kicking. It's at 190. The electric fan seems to run intermittently, okay? Electric fan's not on. So now you got this guy creating all this heat right on the radiator there. Temperature gauge is still just under half. We're at 194. So I'm trying to duplicate the problem that I had earlier. So you see the electric fan didn't kick on with the AC. Let's take an air temp. 72. So now, once we get over 200 here, you with your air conditioner running, the electric fan should be kicking on, and we still have no electric fans. But you know, as the temperature is increasing, the gauge is not. So now we're at 208 degrees and the temp gauge is still right under half there. Earlier, see, we're getting the 210. Still no electric fan. Gauge is still reading within normal operating temperature. No electric fan still. So now, earlier when I was testing this, I got to 215 degrees. We're at 212 right now, and I started noticing coolant dripping. Still not there yet, but what's happening is, see, what happened earlier was the cap started pressing up and it started pushing coolant out of the cap. You can see where it's still kind of wet. I want to check the temperature again because I don't want to overheat this thing. We're at 213, 212, and the gauge is still under half. No electric fans. So like I said earlier, at 215 it started pouring coolant out of that cap there, dripping down into there. You can feel it, she's starting to get hotter and hotter. Let's take another air temp. 75. So as the temperature of the engine increases, the air conditioner gets warmer. It doesn't have that electric fan. I'm going to take it up a little higher, but I don't want to push it to the failure point, you know. But that right there at 215. And let's see if the coolant's leaking again. It's still not dripping. So like I said, at 215 earlier, you can see where it's wet in there, where it was dripping. And this sucker will just keep climbing in heat. Okay, I'm going to shut her down. We're at 219. The temp gauge is still only reading half. So essentially what I think is either, and let me take a temp of this. Okay, we're at about 165 there. So what I think is happening is we had coolant loss issues with this thing. And I just kind of checked the forums. I did a coolant pressure test on it and wasn't getting any leaks, you know, maybe a pound or two after 15-20 minutes, you know, and couldn't figure it out where the coolant's leaking from. And just kind of, well, we'll just let it go and see what happens, keep checking the coolant, you know, and just kept having coolant loss issues. And I know these Jeeps are good for starting on fire. So what I think is people are driving these things around, the gauge is only going up half. They're not realizing that they're overheating the shit out of them, and all this plastic and all these wires and all these things around in here, you know, it gets so hot that that's what's causing the fires. So I don't know if it's, what I'm going to do is replace that sensor and see how that gauge starts acting. But you know, if there's coolant loss issues with these things, it's steaming off and drying, you know, by the time guys see where the coolant's coming from, it's coming from the cap. You know, it's just building up so much pressure, it's starting to, you know, leak out of there. While when you take this off to do a coolant pressure test, the temperature's got to be down, you know. So that's probably why it's impossible to find the coolant leaks on these things. Is they're getting really hot, the gauge isn't going past the half, and I'm not sure if that's just my Jeep, some Jeeps, or what, but it's strange that the temperature gauge only goes to half, the fans don't kick in, and the coolant loss. So like I said, what my first thing to do would be to replace that sensor. And if not, I guess, I don't know if that's a dummy gauge. You know, I've worked with a guy one time and he was trying to say Fords had those where they would slowly creep up and they would sit. And I don't know if that was just because he was a hardcore Chevy guy or what the deal was, but you know, I guess, and it doesn't make sense to me though, is that, and we'll take another temperature reading on this thing here, is I'm reading the temperature going up on here, and obviously the ECM's seeing that, but it's not correlating with the coolant. So if it's a bad coolant sensor, you know, yep, stays right there under half. So if it's a bad sensor, or maybe the gauge can only reach a certain, you know, well then the ECM's not telling the electric fans to kick on, so these things are just, they're starting on fire and losing coolant because they're getting so damn hot. Well, it's not user error because you're reading the gauge within operating temperature. So we'll do another check. And you know, some of you Jeep guys that are a lot smarter, I'm a Ford guy, GM guy, you know, maybe you can tell me what's going on here, or maybe I just cracked the code. Yeah, it's still reading at 210 degrees. So, and like I said, this thing, you pull it in the garage and you could feel the heat barreling off of it. And I mean, that could be very well be a good explanation for why these things are starting on fire. But, you know, maybe some of you Jeep guys can prove me wrong, or you guys have access to all the data and computers and all these things from Jeep, you know. But the reason I made this video is if you're worried about your Jeep starting on fire, or you're having air conditioning issues or coolant loss issues, take your Jeep in and have them do the same thing that I did. Run a, you know, engine temperature test on there and see, you know, what they're getting, and watch that gauge. You know, it's a shame, you know, vehicles like this are burning up. Well, maybe it's programming, maybe it's a pinch harness from the factory, that's a common issue, or maybe those are bad sensors. So I'll do an update video on this. I'm gonna replace that sensor and see if that gauge starts climbing, because I can't ever remember this thing overheating, but I can remember throwing off some heat, and I just thought that was engine bay. So like and subscribe, get the video out there. You know, if I can save some Jeeps from starting on fire, or head gaskets, or save you money, you know, that's what I'm here for. So like, subscribe, and thanks for watching.